There are moments in life that feel like a shooting star across the night sky, brilliant, blinding, impossible to ignore, yet gone so quickly that you barely have time to understand what you just witnessed. People will talk about them for years, not because they lasted forever, but because they were so beautiful that time itself seemed irrelevant. In the summer of 2014, the world of football witnessed a moment like that, and its name was James Rodriguez. Before the 2014 World Cup began, James was not unknown, but he was not yet among the elite. He was playing for Monaco, a club full of ambition, but not quite big enough to carry him into the brightest spotlight. For those who followed football closely, James was clearly special. A silky left foot, elegant technique, vision, and a natural instinct for both passing and finishing. But to most of the world, he was still just a promising player. Colombia entered that World Cup under a dark cloud. Radamel Falcao, their leader, their symbol, their greatest hope, was injured and unable to play. It was not just a tactical loss, it was emotional. A team that had dreamed so boldly was suddenly forced to face reality without its guiding star. And in that moment, James did not speak loudly. He was never the type. But something changed in his eyes, something quiet, something powerful. Perhaps responsibility, perhaps belief, perhaps the awareness that this opportunity might only come once in a lifetime. Against Greece in the opening match, Colombia played with freedom and confidence. And from the very first minutes, James showed he was no longer just part of the story. He was becoming its center. He moved across the pitch with purpose, touched the ball like a man who understood the rhythm of the game belonged to him. A goal and an assist followed, but more than numbers, it was a statement. James was not just playing well, he was carrying a nation. Against Ivory Coast, the challenge grew harder. Stronger opponents, more physical, more experienced. But James remained the same, calm, precise, and ruthless when it mattered. He opened the scoring with a header, then continued to dictate play. Colombia won 2-1. And now, the world was watching. Not because Colombia were winning, but because they had a number 10 playing as if this stage had always been his. The third group match against Japan meant little in terms of qualification, yet James still left his mark. He didn't play out of obligation. He played as if every minute was a chance to prove something. 3 matches, 3 outstanding performances. But this was only the beginning. The round of 16. Colombia versus Uruguay. This was the moment everything changed. Uruguay, even without Luis Suarez, remained disciplined, experienced, and unforgiving. They closed spaces, they waited, and then, in the 28th minute, it happened. James received the ball just outside the box, his back to goal, a position that, for many players, marks the end of an attack. But for him, it was the beginning of something extraordinary. Time slowed. The ball dropped from the sky, and in a moment so brief, it almost escaped reality, he controlled it with his chest. Not a normal touch. This was something else. The ball didn't bounce, didn't escape. It obeyed him, as if there was a silent conversation between them that no one else could hear. Then, without hesitation, his body turned, smooth and instinctive. His left foot swung, and in that instant, it stopped being football. It became art. The volley was struck with absolute perfection. The angle, the power, the timing. Not a fraction too early, not a second too late. The ball left his foot like lightning, tearing through the heavy air of the Maracanã. It didn't float, it surged. A fierce, unstoppable line cutting through space, beyond the desperate reach of the Uruguayan goalkeeper, crashing off the crossbar and into the net. For a single second, the world stood still. No noise, no commentary, only disbelief. And then, an explosion. The Maracana erupted. Thousands rose as one, pulled to their feet by something they couldn't control. Arms raised, voices shattered, faces frozen in awe. Because they knew they had just witnessed something that might only happen once in a lifetime. That was not just a goal, it was perfection, a masterpiece, a moment where football, in its purest form, revealed itself. Somewhere, legends of the past, if they were watching, would have stood up, not to compare, not to judge, but to acknowledge that some moments transcend generations, and this was one of them. Amid that chaos, James did not lose himself. He did not scream. He did not pound his chest. He simply raised his hand, a quiet gesture.
But in his eyes,
everything was there. Focus, belief, and something deeper, as if he knew this goal was not just for this match. It was a message to the world that he had arrived, and that this journey was far from over. In the second half, he scored again from the penalty spot, his fifth goal of the tournament. Colombia won 2-0. But more importantly, the world had a new name. In the quarterfinals, Colombia faced Brazil, and this was where the dream met reality. Brazil, fueled by the weight of a nation, played with intensity and physicality. James was marked tightly, fouled repeatedly, denied the space he had enjoyed before. But he kept fighting. A penalty goal, his sixth of the tournament, secured him the Golden Boot, a feat no one had predicted. Colombia lost 1-2. James left the pitch with tears in his eyes, not for himself, but for the dream that slipped away. Yet sometimes, unfinished dreams become eternal. The World Cup ended.
James Rodriguez
finished as the top scorer with 6 goals. His strike against Uruguay was named the goal of the tournament. And more than anything, he had touched millions of hearts. Not because he was the best, but because he made football feel beautiful. After the tournament, everything changed. Real Madrid signed him for around 80 million euros. A dream realized. The white shirt, the Bernabeu, the echoes of history. And in his first season, James delivered. Goals, assists, moments of brilliance. He became one of the team's brightest stars. But football is not just about talent. It is about timing. As managers changed, as tactics evolved, as the game demanded something different, James slowly began to fade. And then came the turning point. When Zinedine Zidane took charge of Real Madrid, he saw the game through a different lens. Zidane was not just building a team, he was building a machine designed to win at the highest level, where balance mattered more than beauty, and structure mattered more than individual expression. In that vision, there was no longer room for a traditional number 10. James, with all his elegance, his creativity, his instinct to drift between the lines and dictate play, suddenly felt like a piece from another era. Zidane understood that to unlock the full power of his team, he needed something else. Control, discipline, defensive stability. So he made a decision, a ruthless one. He replaced James with Casemiro. It was not about talent, it was about necessity. Casemiro brought steel, balance, protection, a foundation that allowed the rest of the team to flourish. And history would prove Zidane right. Real Madrid became stronger, more complete, and ultimately unstoppable in Europe. But for James, that decision changed everything. No longer the center, he became an option,
Then a substitute.
then a name that slowly slipped out of the conversation. From that moment on, his career became a journey without a true home, moving from one club to another, chasing fragments of the brilliance he once embodied. And in a way, it wasn't just James who faded. It was an entire idea, because his story became a quiet symbol of something larger, the end of an era where the classic number 10 could stand at the heart of a team and shape the game in his own image. Football had moved on, and James, once its brightest shooting star, was left drifting behind.
Bayern Munich.
Everton, other destinations. Flashes of brilliance remained, but never long enough to restore what once was. And the name that had once amazed the world became a question. But what makes James's story special is not his decline. It is the height he once reached. A height so pure, so beautiful, that few ever touch it. The 2014 World Cup was not just his tournament, it was the moment he became the best version of himself. Today, people may speak of an incomplete career, but those who witnessed that summer, they remember a young man with bright eyes and a magical left foot, painting one of the most beautiful chapters in World Cup history. Not everyone becomes a legend, but some, even for a brief moment, make the world believe in magic. James Rodriguez was one of them. A shooting star, brilliant, fleeting, lost in time, but never forgotten.